Hello, welcome back to Blender Sushi Live Noding. In this episode, we're gonna take a look at how we can use SVerchok nodes in Blender and visually kind of make a curve that can be used for other things. You normally get this kind of curve in cycles or EV nodes, and in SVerchok you can do that with SNL with script node light. But that's kind of a bit of hack. So there are quite a few suggestions on how you can use curve and resample it for whatever you want. I'm gonna be trying to cover this method. So yeah, so I'll try to keep it simple. So I'm gonna have a curve in the scene, and it's gonna be Bezier curve. So that's the default Bezier, and I'm gonna jump into SVerchok nodes, and I will be using cylinder. And the output's gonna be BMesh viewer. So we have our cylinder, and our curve is kind of hidden. I'm gonna make this smaller. So how do I connect the curve into the cylinder? So there are a couple of ways. Let me save this very quickly. Curve sampling. You can bring this curve first, objects curve, get selections. So we have our, oh actually, get selection is gonna be our curve. And we need to plug the curve into this guy somehow. Curve is just by default, it's just a vector. So if you try to visualize it, so the curve looks like that, and we don't have ways to resample it easily unless we use some kind of methods to do that. Apparently you can actually use oscillator, like being pointed by Victor Dorfal here. There's this custom, and with a custom you see it's expecting a wave, and Victor say it's actually looking at the y value. So you look at the curve and you can see there's a y-axis. So what we're gonna have from here is a value, but if you use range of number, let's try this, the value between 0 and maybe 1, you can see it's actually interpolating it. So in theory, we can simply plug this into the cylinder, and hopefully it's doing the job. And apparently it does. Okay, so look at this parallels, and look at this count, and I will create a number. So maybe we want to resample the curve 50 times. So we plug 50 there as well. So now we indeed resampling this cylinder 50 times. So this curve is now drawing the cylinder. If I make changes, like I go to the top view and draw it like that, and make an update, so it's updating. So ideally we are not looking at it from the top view like that, because cylinder is like this. I'm just gonna rotate the curve Rx 90 degree, and then Ry 90 degrees, or maybe minus 90. So this curve now representing this guy, even though it's not exact, it's depending on the amplitude. For example, you have control over that kind of thing. You can actually kind of play around with the period and things like that. So that's kind of fancy thing we can do. So it's already, this curve is being resampled depending on how many times we want this to be. So let's play around with this idea for now. So normally with SVerchok, it's gonna update. So this is a curve resampling advanced. So SVerchok only updates if we scrub the timeline. So normally if I make changes to this curve, for example, and update it, I just use the arrow key. If I keep the playback running, I can play around with this, and the curve now adjusted the cylinder. So if I do things like subdivide the curve, for example, how many times? 3 times. Okay, so now we have more points to work with. We can really reshape our cylinder. So you might think, okay, you can use revolve and the curve just to get this cylinder, right? But of course, this curve is just like kind of like this curve can be anything. It's not just a curve. You can use grease pencil, and you can also use F curve. Like for example, in this case, Zephy uses the F curve. I mean, oh, maybe he doesn't use F curve, but you can actually do that. So if you have like an empty, and if you animate the empty, for example, so let's move this to the side for now. So this empty, I just make keyframe, put the keyframe on the frame 0 for example, and then okay, go back to the front view. Okay, and then I make another keyframe here. So 1 1 keyframe locations. So yeah, we have that keyframes, and if we open up graph editor, select our empty, we have this curve, and SVerchok actually can read that curve as well. So if you use F curve, you can evaluate the empty and select one of these X, Y, or Z. So let's pick one. Let me enable this only selected curve keyframes to be displayed. So you either select X or Z location F curve, and then you use this to resample the value. It sounds slightly complicated, but it's not. So you have to pick the right one. So this value, of course, should be this one. Okay. And supposedly we can use this value and plug this into the cylinder to control the shape. I'm not seeing this happening. Maybe there's something wrong. So that's the empty, okay. This frame might be Oh, maybe it should go from 0 to 10. Okay, of course, because our keyframe is between 0 and 10. Okay, so now we have a value. So if we have 50, we can plug this output into our meridians. So this value is now based on this curve, I think. So 0 and 10, 0 and 10. Yeah, I think that should be correct. There you go. So if I select this empty and then I use the something like modifier, maybe noise modifier, it's going to be affecting our cylinder. So slightly tricky, but it's not so bad. So this is another way you can bring in your own curve and then resample it whatever you like, and then use it for other things, like in this case to deform this cylinder. And yeah, I think that's actually really useful. Depending on what you're doing, you can perhaps create a leaf based on this. So cylinder is a cylinder, but you can just transform mesh, for example, and then transform it in the space of global and just scale it in Y, for example, just flatten it. So you have something that's a little bit like a leaf. If we go back to our curve, keep the playback running, maybe reshape our curve. Perhaps this curve needs to have amplitude of 2, so it's more like this curve. So now we can reshape it until it looks like a leaf. So that's just one way. So normally you can also use this for graphing a lot of things, a lot of value, because if you actually to manually generate the value, it's not always accurate. You always having a curve, really you can have kind of like a not precise, like a flexibility in defining the value. So this is for the bottom part. So if it's like a leaf, slightly sharper down there. I have a feeling that it's not fully respecting the shape, but it's kind of almost correct. Maybe the range is not correct. So 0 to 1. Yeah, I think that's correct. Maybe we need more coefficients, not really. But I think that's more or less kind of what I'm trying to show you. Maybe the way this custom oscillator is doing it is not actually fully respecting the shape of the curve, but it's more like just the y axis. Yeah, that's interesting, because if you actually use there's another method where you use the GP, use pencil setup, and then kind of draw the curve. But anyhow, that's basically based on this idea, UI curves manual. Benny, thanks Benny for asking, and all the SVerchok developer for the potential answers. So yeah, hopefully this is useful. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.